Hello and welcome to the audio recording of the book Tarona's Ghostly Encounters. These are accounts of real situations which occurred while Tarona was working as a paranormal investigator. So hold on to your seats.
Chapter 5. Help for people that have had tragedies. Visit from a detective. Ghost of a publican. Some of the most harrowing experiences for me have come when people have phoned and asked for help in finding missing relatives or loved ones. Several years ago, my phone rang and an elderly man's voice asked if it would be possible for me to locate the whereabouts of his missing wife. He said forthrightly that he did not believe in people like me, and he claimed he was only phoning because a friend had suggested that he should do so. As the man was speaking, pictures of a lake somewhere in the Midlands, I feel it would be insensitive to give the exact location, were being shown to me. I told him my psychic senses were picking up a large lake with a rail track running at the back of it. As I gave him the exact area, I hoped he wouldn't ask me if his wife was in the water. At this point he got very upset and angry. "That's rubbish," he insisted. "She could not walk far, so how the hell would she get there?" I suggested to him that she could have hired a taxi, been brought there, but still more abusive language he gave me. "Please understand, sir, I can only give you what I'm seeing, and this picture of this lake is being shown to me," I said. My gut feeling told me his wife was dead, but I would not have revealed such delicate information over the telephone. "What if I pay you?" he insisted. "Would you be able to find out where she really is?" Not taking offence at the man's rudeness because of his obvious distress, I gently repeated the name of the place being shown to me. Angrily, he slammed the phone down. By now, I knew she was dead and had been for a little while, but the logical side of me hoped I'd been mistaken. A short time afterwards, a local paper was delivered to my door, and there were headlines concerning the missing woman. Her body had been found in the exact lake I had described to her husband. The man never contacted me again. A long journey to my home was taken by the mother of a murder victim in this next story. This was due to some unplanned information channeled to me whilst I was on holiday in Greece, of all places. Let me say that the only investigating my family wanted me to do on holiday involved ancient ruins, monuments, and such like. About 2 days into my vacation, a young couple who had been desperately trying to control their boisterous 2-year-old started engaging in friendly conversation. It was mainly centred on where to go and what to do and so on. The normal holiday banter. The young man, Chris, kept insisting he knew me from somewhere. A few weeks prior to this family holiday, I had been on a popular morning programme called The Time and Place, and secretly I wondered if he had seen me on TV. I tried to brush off his remarks, saying I must have a double. On holiday, we prefer to keep my profession secret because otherwise most of the time would be spent with almost everyone sticking out their palms and asking me to tell their futures. Suddenly Chris said, "It's your voice. I know where I've seen you, on the television." I quietly asked him not to mention this to other residents because this was our family holiday and it was not my intention to spend it doing or talking about my work. For no obvious reason, whilst I was talking to the young man, violent images suddenly interrupted the conversation. I was being shown old stone steps, a building looking like a public house, a trail of blood, and a young woman's dead body. Whatever did this have to do with the pleasant young man, I wondered. Perceptive himself, he must have read my expression and asked what was wrong. Glancing up directly into his eyes, I asked him what he knew about a girl's death, stone steps, and a public house. "My God, how did you know about that?" he mumbled, his face frozen in shock. He went on to tell me that a few years previously he used to drink in the pub I was describing. The landlord was arrested for the girl's murder. He was now in prison, but they never did find the body. "Whether he is guilty of the murder or not, I don't know," he added. "Working as a milkman these days, my deliveries take me to the family of the murdered girl. The father is convinced she is still alive and sits in vain each day and night at the window waiting for her return." Images were now flooding into my mind, and I was being shown a deep quarry, at the bottom of which was the body of a female. When I told Chris I was also picking up a forthcoming heart attack from a member of this family, he was left with a huge burden to pass on. Let's face it, how could he approach the family and say, "By the way, whilst on holiday, I met up with a clairvoyant and she thinks your daughter is buried at the bottom of a quarry and also one of you will have a heart attack"? Of course, I would not have blamed him if he had never mentioned to anyone what I had described. A few days after I had returned home, my telephone rang and it was the girl's mother. Chris had bravely passed on the message. Arrangements were made for the mother to visit my home, and a week later 3 family members sat in my front room, telling them in every detail what I had seen was pretty grim and feeling like a prophet of doom and gloom. I warned them a male family member was going to have a heart attack. I thought at the time it would be the murdered girl's father. A month or so after our meeting, the girl's mother rang to tell me of her brother being admitted to hospital with a heart attack. The information concerning the quarry was passed on to the authorities. The quarry was located, but sadly it had been filled in a year or so previously. The man in prison for the crime would not give the girl's family any information about their daughter's body, insisting he was innocent. Let's hope that someday something will happen that will enable the family to put to rest the tragic death of their daughter. Another client who came to see me at one holistic festival got more than a few answers in connection with a friend's death. It was a bank holiday weekend and glorious sunshine filtered through the hotel's window, shining prisms of light across the large room. Before the event opened, a silent entity hung close to me, and the feeling that it was waiting patiently for someone came to mind. The rest of the room was hot, and many people at the exhibition set up their own fans to keep them cool in the heat. My corner was freezing. The ghostly pocket of air chilled me, even though the hot sunshine was shining in through the windows at the back of me. Around mid-morning, a young woman sat down at my stand. In an instant, the silent watchers started to send telepathic messages through me for this woman. I was killed with an old poison that could not be detected. Tell my mother to keep the baby. She must realize I never have left my child. I never would have taken my own life. When I apologized for giving her such a gruesome message, she begged me to continue relaying the information, saying it was all making perfect sense to her. Once the session was finished, the woman said, "The person you have been talking about was my friend. I was so upset that I moved to Leicestershire to be a long way away from what happened. The baby was indeed living with the grandmother who was fighting to keep it. She persuaded the police to reopen the investigation into the case. Her friend's spirit vanished after I relayed her messages. Although to date I have no other information, but let's hope truth about the young mother's death is revealed in time." The next case involved me being visited by a member of the CID. There had been a serial killer on the loose. The body of one of his victims was found in Leicestershire. It was an extremely busy Monday and I was smack bang in the middle of a large pile of ironing when my front doorbell rang. I looked through one of the small glass panels to see a tall, smartly dressed man standing there. My safety chain was on and the door only opened a few inches. "Can I help you?" I asked. The man produced a card stating he was from the police and he was with the CID and would like to talk to me on official police business. He followed me into the lounge and proceeded to tell just what the official police business was all about. There had been a succession of murders throughout the region, and it was mainly women who had been working in prostitution who were involved. Taking a photo picture out of his leather briefcase, he asked me to take a look. I gazed deeply into the photo for a few moments before gently tuning in to the girl. This was in no way difficult for me because I could feel her presence standing alongside of us. She started to show me a black choker, then a black scarf. Next came a tight pulling sensation around my throat and I knew that she had been strangled. The words "no clothes" came through and I asked the CID man if she had been found naked. He would not give me any information. Next came the image of a woman wearing a long waistcoat and her spirit was pulling down the waistcoat trying to disguise her over-generous hips. I asked the officer if a woman's waistcoat had been found, but he again refused to give me any information. The spirit started showing me her last movements. A country pub and a restaurant had been her final stop before death. She was showing me the inside of the pub and that she had felt anxious and must have been suspicion of the company she was in. Again, I asked the CID man if any trace of alcohol was found in her body. "I cannot tell you," he said. By now, I had become a little bit fed up with his attitude. After all, I was relaying clairvoyant messages for him and was not given any feedback as to their accuracy. Finally, she showed me herself sitting in the front seat of a motor vehicle. A black tie or scarf was placed over her head from behind and then around her neck. She was being strangled. A few weeks later, a newspaper report stated the woman had been sighted in a country pub on the day of her murder. To date, the murder is still unsolved. Before leaving my house, the CID man wrote down his name and telephone number in case anything else should come through regarding the woman. The only feedback from me came several months later, when a man I was doing clairvoyance for told me at the end of the reading that I had apparently given some information that no one else knew about. Could it have been concerning the waistcoat? Although this next story is about suicide, not about murder, My feelings are that it would be in poor taste to name the town where the event took place. Before visiting the town, I had no knowledge of its history nor of any of its inhabitants. The investigation was set up for me by the editor of a free newspaper many years ago. The busy road separating the two public houses, but it would take more than a road to separate the same ghostly presence who haunted them. Although the landlord at one pub had never seen the ghost, he was nevertheless puzzled by the mysterious disappearance of items that tended to turn up in entirely different locations, days or even weeks later. The missing items appeared to be covered in dust. It was all very mysterious. It is so frustrating, he told me. Just the other day I put a bottle of cleaning solution on my cellar steps. Within hours it had disappeared, and still I haven't found it. The bar and the lounge felt friendly enough, and so did the landlord's quarters. As I stood at the very top of the stairs, directly below the sealed attic, an eerie presence could be felt. I could sense this invisible spirit watching me, going from room to room. Suddenly, impressions of a tall, well-made man with dark hair came through. So did the word suicide. Next came visions of blood, and intense pain filled my head. A shotgun and rifles of all descriptions came into mind, and this indicated to me someone had ended their life with a gun. Did anyone commit suicide on these premises, I asked, my head still pounding. Not to my knowledge, came the reply. Telling the landlord what I had seen, I asked him if any of this information made sense to him. It does, he said, bewildered. A publican killed himself, but it was in the public house opposite, not here. He went on to explain how around 20 years ago a landlord had taken his own life by shooting himself in the head. Why on earth should I pick this up here in your place, I remarked, totally baffled. Well, he did used to drink here. Maybe that's got something to do with it. His best mates drink here too. He is in the bar now, and maybe he could give you some more information about him. I talked to the middle-aged man at the bar, telling him the ghost felt anger and betrayal. Does a blonde woman have anything to do with this? I asked. Yes, she was a friend of his. Kindly putting the traumatic experience of his friend's death behind him, he answered my questions, and all my findings made sense. But why was this former publican haunting that particular pub? Richard, the editor of the free newspaper, had arranged for me to investigate these hauntings. He knew more about the ghost than he was telling, but respected my wishes and gave me no previous information until I finished. We crossed the busy road to the public house opposite. Richard told me the last time he had gone there, he had been invited down into the cellar, and it made the hair stand up on the back of his neck. The vibrations from the buildings were strange, convincing me something sinister happened there many centuries ago, but this, I mean other happenings, quite separate from the tragic death of this landlord. We walked down the circular steps into the cellar below, and Richard pointed to the spot where the body had lain. He was found over there. He had shot himself through the head. From the cold chill surrounding us, we could feel the ghost of the former landlord who had followed us back into his former pub. His spirit soon began to communicate with me. As I noticed how nervous Richard was, I tried to calm him down. Although the landlord did not materialize for us, we could feel him. I knew he was trying to reach me gently, giving me messages about a woman and the difficulties in their relationship. These are things best not revealed in print. He also mentioned the name John and said he was sorry. He wanted to let his friend know he could not have stopped him from killing himself. Offering to stay and help him, I began to gain the spirit's trust, and my link with him became even stronger. He started moving closer to us, but sadly without warning, the present landlord's feet could be heard on the cellar steps, momentarily breaking my link. Unknowingly, he had disrupted everything. The ghost started retreating into the corner of the cellar. Nothing more could be done that day. Returning upstairs, Richard and I asked the present landlord if he had experienced any disturbance. Thankfully, he had not. As we stood at the bar, still talking, from nowhere came a surge of energy that passed right through my body. This could only be described as a strong current or force, and it was not connected with the ghost. I was bewildered by scenes of executions from centuries ago, images of horse-drawn carts, and an incredible large axe like those used in medieval times had me wondering if I should go home and rest. There was more to this building, or rather to the land, than was at first apparent. Something much more sinister. It was then that the picture of a prison came to me. Apparently many centuries previously, a courthouse and execution gallows had stood on the site. Many prisoners found guilty of their crimes were taken outside and hung by the neck. Could the axe have been used here before the hangings, I wondered. Before we left, the words karma, much karma, were given to me. Let us hope that one day it will be possible for me to return and find out what is stopping the ghost from finding peace. The true reason he killed himself, and dispel the rumours that still surround his strange passing. There are many questions I would like answered concerning the land and the goings on. Maybe then true peace can be restored.